Hello, everyone. Just give it a few more seconds. Let's see if some more people are joining. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Workato product webinar. Today, we are going to be covering files and attachments and how to deal with them inside your recipes. So, as you know, we have this every 2 weeks, and it's always on Fridays at 11 a.m. The next topic is going to be advanced trigger processing and data transformation, May 9th and June 2nd. And if you have, again, if you have other topics that you want to learn more about, just send us an email and we will prioritize those. We are also going to be starting a Get to Know Workato series, and we will send you more information about that as we have more material which is covered up. We are building it right now, but we should have most of that ready in the next few weeks. So in today's topic, we'll talk a little bit, in maybe not 15 minutes, but a little bit about what this topic is about. Then go into the most of it will be in the showing you the use cases, the demo of how the system works, and then we'll leave some time for Q&A. And if you have any questions, you can send it on chat. We will take them as we finish up. So some other things. All the past webinars are at product.workato.com. So you can go there. And if you have missed any of the older ones, you can just look at it over there. The YouTube channel is another good way to find out resources about Workato. And you'll find these webinars as well as learning material over there. And then there's docs.workato.com. So let me go to those areas. So this is the docs.workato.com. You can see all the topics that are important to know about in building recipes. You'll find them here. And today's talk that we are doing is going to be under files and attachments. So if you go there, you'll see lots of the things that we cover are already described here. This is the product hub where you can see old recordings. So there's the list processing, lookup tables. Those are all over there. And I talked about, I also want to show you, what is this? This is another place which I think is a good place to find solutions. One is forums. You can go to the help center, the support.workato.com. In forums, you'll see many topics there. And also in solutions, if you go to solutions, there are many questions which are answered here. So hopefully, we keep revamping this based on your questions and what people ask. But in the forum area, you can also ask and you can also participate. You can, if someone has asked any question, you can respond to that. And we are thinking of giving out some kind of a reward for people who are heavily participating in forums. So, if you're active, there will be something that you'll get back. So, and plus, nowadays everyone wants to help everyone else. So out of your own free goodwill, you can help people. All right. So let's see. This is that. And so what are we going to be talking about today? Files and attachments. So these are the different types of files that you have in a system. They're documents, .doc, XLS, etc. They're audio files, the video files, image files, and then there are files that we can work on. So they're like, there are CSVs, for example, that you can actually look at. There are XML files that you can look at, and there are JSON files. These are files that you can process it inside your recipe. Most of the other types of files are just pass through. So if you send an MP4 or if you send a PDF, it's just a pass through. We don't process them. But for a CSV, JSON, and XML, we actually give you the data and you can work on it. And these files, they come from different places, right? So they live inside of a Dropbox or a Google Drive or a Box, OneDrive, etc. And so those are, storage type of places like the cloud drives. And then there are apps which also have files, and mostly they will appear as attachments. So for example, in SalesForce, with any entity, like with an account or with a case, you can have attachments. Similarly with Zendesk, if you have a ticket, you can have attachments on it. A mail sometimes come with attachments, so that's another place. You can have attachments that you send through RingCentral or with Twilio. All of these applications let you handle files. So it can give you files, or you can give it files. So all of these apps kind of interact with files and attachments. And then there is also another type of storage. This is not a cloud drive, but another type of storage is FTP and SFTP. So it could be a basic SFTP or FTP, or you can use an application like Brick FTP where you can store files. And then there's of course on-prem. We are not going to be covering some of these things today, but if you do have on-prem systems, and if you have a file sitting in one of your drives, if you have our on-prem agent and connector running on your system inside the firewall, those files are also accessible. And that goes with not only files but databases and other systems which are on-premise. We can connect to those systems if you have the on-prem version of Workato. So some of the use cases we'll cover. I think we'll go from the simple to the more complex. So first we'll try to do the simple move file from one place to another, and then we will using URL, and then we will try to move files using the content. So, not just the URL, but using a content that we download from the source that is pointing to us, and then a little bit of how you can process the files. So we'll cover some of that. So here, there's some practical use cases that we have seen people using. So here, SalesForce and Zendesk are exchanging attachments and also storing those attachments in Dropbox. So we have seen people do that. We have seen people who are storing tickets and instead of sometimes many times the Jira people, they use Confluence to store stuff, but some of them also use Box or Dropbox kind of a storage to store information. And again, in the same way, if you have to send something out to a customer, you can just FTP it to them. And this one is more of a service use case where someone is taking a picture on RingCentral and sending it out to Salesforce and to Box, and then maybe below this there is a if it was a service call, below this there is a Jira or something, Jira or Zendesk or Freshdesk, and it gets logged into that as a ticket along with the attachment, and then the whole flow of how to process that ticket, that starts over there. And this is again, it's a very simple, email, NetSuite and doc parser use case where you can get help from an external system like a doc parser, and you can get a PDF and process it, and then store that information inside NetSuite. So we'll not cover all of those, but you get the different scenarios that people are trying to do. So let's go to this cases here. Let me just make it full screen and also increase the size. So this is a very simple scenario, and what we are doing here is moving new files in Dropbox to Box, right? And we are doing this via public URL. So here in the trigger, we are saying new updated file in Dropbox. So you can say this is a webhook. So the moment a new file is dropped into Dropbox, it is going to tell us. And we are looking at a root. At the root folder, of course, you can choose other folders if you want to. And we are saying, give me a. So this is a functionality that Dropbox offers. They can give you a temporary URL that is only valid for 4 hours. So we are saying, give me one, and then in the once that file comes in, we search in Box to see if that file exists. So we will go through the file and we get the name out of it, and we search for it. That we don't give a type, and we say, it is not an exact match. And if this is not found, then we'll upload the file into Box. So what we are doing here is we are saying Box upload file from URL, and this URL is coming from the incoming URL here. You see that URL that came from there, and that's going to. So this is a very efficient way of transferring files, because the file itself is not going through our system. We are just passing the URL to Box and saying, get it from there. It's a public URL. It has to be a public URL, and Box is going to pull it out from there and process it, and create it inside its system. A slightly more, now this is going in the reverse direction. Here we went from Dropbox to Box. This is it's doing the same thing in a sense, but it's going the other way. It's going from Box to Dropbox. Now here I just put in this monitor actions for error kind of a structure, because sometimes there may be unknown errors that can happen. So it's always good to kind of put it inside a structure like this. So whenever there's an error, you can handle it in the way you want to handle it, as opposed to the system just giving it to you as an error email. So what we are doing here, again, similar to the previous one, Box is looking for a new file in a directory, and in this case we are looking for a home folder. We are saying subfolder no, and you will see that some of the different systems, they don't look exactly the same. In the case of Box, the subfolder and others were not there. Here you can say which folder and if I should go into the subfolders. So depending on the capability of the systems, you'll see slight variation in how they behave. And for example, in the case of Dropbox, you said that you saw that there was this option to give me a public URL, right, which lasted for 4 hours. But in the case of Box, you don't have that. And also, you can have this trigger if condition. So if you wanted to, discard certain things, you can do that. In the case of Box, Dropbox, there was no condition here available. So depending on what application you're looking at, there are variations in both the trigger and action. So here in Box, you're looking at the home folder. You're saying, I don't want to look at anything else. I don't have a trigger filter. And then I'm wrapping this inside a monitor actions for error loop, not loop, but in a structure. Now I'm doing a search for files in Dropbox, similar to what I did before, right? And here I have the name directly, so I don't have to do any of those formula mangling that I have to do for Dropbox. So I'm using the name directly, and I'm saying what folder I'm going to look for it in. So I'm saying it's in the demo folder. So if it is not there, then I look for, I'm refetching the downloadable URL. So get the file download URL. Now you will notice that Box, in the trigger itself, there was a download URL, but we have noticed that sometimes that is not as reliable. So that's why it's good to get this explicitly, get file downloadable URL from Box, and then use that to do the load. So here I'm getting this URL, from here, and similar to Box, it's the similar to Dropbox, it's the same way, right? Now I add, just as another example, I added a Google Drive. So here I'm saying, search for the folder in Google Drive, and if it is not present, log a message. I didn't do anything more. In the case of Google Drive, we don't have the capability to add files into the Google Drive yet, but if there is a requirement for it, I think we can add it. So if you see the need for adding more, adding files to Google Drive, let us know. Any questions?
There's one question which is, can you do a point-to-point data transfer where both source and destination are on-premise repositories without routing it to cloud?
Probably not. I would say no.
But we can access the...
You can access it, but if it is a URL based, we can do it. But if it has to go as a content, you cannot. It has to go outside, and I'll talk about that in a second. Because if it has to be based on content, then the content has to come into the recipe. Any other?
There's a question about on-prem support and pricing, but we can take that later on. Yeah.
So so the last question, actually, what I was saying, is kind of shown in this example here. So what we are doing here, we are assuming that the mail came in with an attachment. So I'm looking for emails, and if there was an attachment ID in any of the emails or in the email that I got, then I will loop through the attachments, and I will download the file, download the email attachment from Gmail, and see here I'm giving the attachment ID, and then I'm uploading the content to Box. So here in this case, the previous person who was asking, here I'm actually getting the content out, and then I'm moving the content back into Box. So this kind of a scenario, if you're doing, imagine the same thing, if this was an on-prem FTP and the output was also an on-prem FTP, then it has to go through this conversion of the, getting the attachment document out into the recipe and then sending it to the recipient.
So it has to be routed through.
It has to be routed through. Now, one thing I would like to mention in this kind of cases where you're moving content out, typically for large files, this is not a very good idea. We have a limit of 25 megabytes when you're moving content like this. That's the general guideline, that if it's more than 25 megabytes, it may or may not work. So plus, it also strains the system, both your system and our system, it strains it because it has to, the whole payload has to come into us, we have to process it and then move it out. So it's if it is possible to do with URLs, that's the better way to do it.
So there's an interesting question from Gina. It's is it possible to grab a PDF from a Google folder and insert as an attachment or file into SalesForce? Mm-hmm. But the condition is the Google URL is available, but not the absolute path, how to access.
It has to be, let's take a look. So download file contents is how you'll do it. So here I can give the file ID, right? I can get it, I can somehow get the file ID. And then this result, if I add another step, it doesn't matter, log message. So here I'm getting the payload. So that data I can pass into the SalesForce system. Now, what I'll do is, I'll have to do, because SalesForce takes, so that's another thing that I was going to talk about. So SalesForce has to take base 64 encoded. So we have to do something like this, payload.base64, and then move it to Salesforce. So imagine this was an attachment that I was doing in Salesforce, then it'll be something like this. You'll download the file and then get the data and then encode it and send it out.
Okay, thanks.
Good. So this is, again, I think this is, goes into that good questions. So this leads to the next thing that I was going to show, which is, file from box to, so imagine this was Drive and this was going to Salesforce. So here we are doing the same thing that the previous, Gina was talking about. So I'm getting the file from box, and, you are familiar with all of that stuff. And then it is getting the file from the URL. And here, when I use this download file from URL, I have this capability to say base64 encoding. In the previous case, I did, I just did a .base64. But in this case, I'm just saying use base64 encoding, and the output of this is going to be pushed in here. So, actually, I don't need this because it's already done. I think I'd put it there just to show that it could be done. Now here you can see that it is moving it in, and it is hard-coded to attach to a Salesforce. So of course, in your real scenario, it is not going to be like this. The parent ID will be something that came from somewhere. So it could be a case, it could be an account that you're attaching it to. That takes us to the next scenario. So here we are doing the same thing, kind of. So here the information is coming from a Zendesk ticket, right? So I'm getting a ticket in real time from Zendesk, and once I get it, I'm getting the comment. So in Zendesk, the attachments are at the comment level. So I'm getting the comments, and then I'm creating a case in Salesforce corresponding to that ticket, right? And then for each of the comments, I'm going down, I'm processing each of the comments. Like you're all familiar with how that happens. And then I'm processing attachments for each comment. And if there was an attachment ID, then I download the file from URL. So here again, content URL, I'm getting it from Zendesk and from this one here. And then I'm creating the attachment in Salesforce. And here, in the previous case, we had said parent ID is, hard-coded. So here I'm actually getting the parent ID from the case I created. So it's going to be attached to the case, right? And here is the body of the, the information that I got from the URL. So it's over there. And, if you remember that when I downloaded it, I did a base64. So that came from there encoded. And I put in a content type here. It's an optional thing, but, I just put it in. So that's basically, how you'll move the same thing into, from, you could have done it from Drive also, Google Drive. I think, additionally here, what I'm doing is, just as an example, I'm doing a download file from URL. The one thing I wanted to actually, there's a reason I did this one. So when you're moving it to box, it doesn't, when you're moving it to box, it doesn't like a base64 encoded content. So here I had to do the download again, and I said base64 encoding is no. Because otherwise when I tried it without the base64, with the base64, it created some garbage. It was not useful, I think you can of course decode it if you have to. Let me just show you how. So let's say that this came in, I can do decode base64. If I had the previous one, this was another way of doing it. I could have used the same download from before and done a decode base64 and then use that. So these things take care of all the file movement. So in most of these cases, you're moving files which are basically not read by the system. We are not reading it. We are not processing it in any way. So next, we want to talk about files, and I'm going to take the example of CSV, where these are files which have data that we want to look at inside our recipes. So this one here is moving a CSV file from Box and creating something in NetSuite, right? So it's a new CSV file in Box is the trigger. You're familiar with all of this, and you have to say what's the comma separator is comma, and you have to give the field names of the incoming file. So previously we used to have, we used to interpret the field names based on the data, but we have had some issues with that, so I think this is a safer way of doing it. So you put in the field names, and then for each line, so now when you come in here, you will see that the box that came in, the box file trigger that came in, it came in with all these rows, right? So now I can process these rows one by one, and here inside this are the columns that each line has, right? So I'm looping through, and one by one I'm adding it to NetSuite, right? So I'm creating a NetSuite inventory item here. So no big deal. Now one thing I want to point out here is when I was processing this file, I did not mention a CSV batch size. So by default, the batch size is 100, and I think we should mention that somewhere here. Maybe we should note this down. We should say that the default batch size is 100. Okay. So what it means is, if you don't give a batch size, it's a batch size of 100. So if you had a record, if you had a file which had, 500 lines, you will get 5 calls to the recipe. First 100, second 100, third 100, and so on, right? The problem you have to be aware of, this is it's doing NetSuite inventory item, so it's not a problem. But suppose you are doing a GL processing. Whenever you're creating a GL record, it wants balanced sets. So you should not be splitting up the file in those cases. So if you had a file, that my GL size is typically 300 records, you should put in a file size of 300. So that the file is not going to be split. So that's actually very important to remember, especially if you're doing financial processing where the file itself has to contain all the data. You cannot process it in chunks. So if you're doing any kind of processing, including that involves financials and especially GL, where the entire set has to be balanced, you have to be careful about this thing here, this batch size. Okay, so let's go to this one here. What is this one? Okay, I think this one was, I created a file where, I was trying to show an example where I can split up a file and create sub-files. Again, wanted to illustrate a couple of things here. One is the batching of the file. So if you see here, I've used a batch size of 10, right? So every 10, it'll create a file. And down below, now, that was the reason actually I had, so I'll talk about that in a second. So I'm doing this is, the first thing, when I go through this file, when I read it, I actually get the data as it's not very, it is not very consumable inside the recipe yet. If I want to load it inside a, if I want to create another file in Box, I cannot consume it. I cannot just send the payload and do it. So what I do is I do a compose, and let me show you what that means. So I'm saying I'm using the utility called compose. I'm saying I'll get these, the columns I'm going to create are country code, ISO code, and continent. And I will create a header line. And I'm going to get these lines from this box that came in. This is where I'm getting the rows from. So down below, this one, and then I'm mapping the files from here. So you see the columns. So these are being mapped. Country, ISO code, and so on. So I'm mapping them into this. Now I get consumable file that I can use to create the box. Oops, it just keeps upload file. So now the content is from this compose CSV, and I'm just moving that in, and I'm giving it a folder and a name and so on, right? And then just to show some, what compose means, and there is another thing called parse. I want to show you what the data looks like. So parse, again, it takes the list and it'll create a string, comma separated string of values. So I'll show you in the actual job. So let's go to the jobs. So when you read from CSV inbox, this is what you get. And if you look at rows, it has all this other garbage also, line 248 and end of file is true, and so on. The actual data is inside here, right? So when it's not easy for it to kind of, I cannot pass this whole thing as one set to the upload file to box. So in the compose, I pass that in, I passed all these lines in, and this is what it created. You see comma separated list of values, right? Country code, ISO code, continent, and then Zimbabwe, ZW, AF, Zambia, and so on, and this is the next line. And so this, now I am able to move into the create file. And now this is the file that is being created. Now when I took this output of this one, the compose, which was a comma delimited kind of file, and when I did a parse, this is how it comes up back. It's back again in this list, the array format, right? So all of these are kind of back in the array format. So if you're doing array processing, and you've got a comma separated set of data, you can do a parse CSV and it'll give it to you in a format that you can now process, because now I can do a for loop on this one and process it. Any questions?
There are lots, but let's cover this and then we can, because those questions will need a deep dive, so we can go to those in the end.
All right, so let's go to the next one. So so that's, I think I had some more stuff here. Let me just go through. Some other examples I wanted to show. I had stopped the job here, and I think I had this one before. So download file from URL. If you give it a file name, base64, upload file from URL. It's we covered this one before also, so it's okay. All right. The next scenario is this is a RingCentral. This could have been Twilio or any other thing. In this example, this is something that we had worked with RingCentral on. So
make it a little bigger.
It's too small.
Yeah.
Okay. Is good.
Yeah.
So you're getting an SMS with a MMS picture in it. MMS document in it. And then we look at, this could have been CRM, any CRM. This is Insightly. It could have been SalesForce, whatever. We are looking for the contact. And then we, if the contact is not there, we create the contact. So here, I think we looked at it by the phone number. And if we create the contact and make ring out, call in RingCentral. So, just call back the customer. Or was it connect customer with an available account manager, and then call and then call someone else, and then down below I think we are storing get the attachment from the MMS that came in. So if you look at here, this URI, it came from the for each of this, from step 12. So which was this one here, create the issue. Not create the issue for each. Okay, let's do 12. So for each item in RingCentral attachments, we are getting the attachments and we are adding that here, right? Inside, we are getting that attachment, and then we are adding that attachment, upload that attachment into Jira. So basically what we are doing is, imagine that someone in the field, they have an issue, they took a picture of that problem, and they sent an email, they sent a MMS to a number, right? Once the number comes in, you find out who that person was. You found out if they exist in your system, and if they existed, then fine. If they did not exist, you created them, and then you created a Jira ticket for them, and you attach the files, the documents that came with it. You attach that to the Jira.
Yeah, I think this was a very interesting use case for insurance claims when you had an accident and you need to.
That's right.
You need to submit evidence, of the damage done to your vehicle. So you take pictures and send it to a customer support number.
Exactly. And there was another use case where I think another one of our customers were using it, not with RingCentral but with Twilio, where they're doing the same thing. Where someone in the field, they find that there's a problem with a machine. They take a picture of the machine, whatever is relevant, and send an SMS back. And the same scenario. That I know, and then there was another one we wanted to talk about.
I think the questions we have, it should take us through the end of the webinar. So,
okay.
Yeah. So that's why I wanted us to hold off. Okay. If anyone has questions, and if you would like to speak to Amlan instead of posting it on the forum, we can unmute you and you can ask the question directly. But let's start with the questions that we have gotten so far. So Matthew has a question for Box. His organization cannot use shared URLs. So the question is, will it still work without shared URLs that it has as login ID and admin ID? So in that case,
I don't, so it requires a shared URL to download the content. So Dimitris is also there. Let's just unmute him. I think we cannot do, if it's not a shared URL, it will not let us download it.
Hi, Dimitris here. I think it should work with the get, what is it called? The download get text file contents action on Box.
Even if it is a public, not public URL.
That one doesn't depend on a shared URL. It depends on the Box internal file ID, which you get in the trigger.
One, right? This one here, the get. Why is it not? This one here.
No, it's a different action. It's get text file content.
Get text file content. This one.
Yeah, that one.
But is it? But if it's a text file, is Matthew? Is it a text file or is it a regular file?
Let me unmute. Hey Matthew, I'm going to unmute you, and then you can give us a little more information.
So if it was not a text file, then you could have used the other one, right? The get file.
Hey Matthew, can you please ask your question and give us some more details?
No. Okay. So I think, so
Matthew, you're unmuted. You can speak.
Maybe his system is not allowing him to speak. So anyway, I think what we can go on to.
He said it's a regular file. And
what's a regular file? Is it a text or is it a PDF or?
Okay, Matthew, let's do this. We'll follow up with you on an email so you can give us more information, and somebody from our customer success team will help you with what the right action to use.
And so these are the two options available, right? Get text file content and get file download URL. So,
okay.
If you should try, Matthew, you should try it with one of, depending on your use case, you should try with these and see what happens. And if you have problems, let us know.
Okay. So the next question is from Tyler. How do we handle receiving CSV files attached to an email that have more than 200 rows, since Workato has a 200 row limit on parsing CSV?
That is a problem right now. So if you have files which are bigger than 200 rows, I think you have to drop it somewhere, right? So you cannot process it as is. Maybe one option is to kind of just, keep the attachment, drop the attachment into some directory, and then process that directory, process it as a CSV file as a trigger, because triggers don't have any limitation. So take the attachment, drop it into a location, and then read it from there.
Okay. So the first recipe drops it in a location.
First recipe drops it into a location,
okay,
and then read the CSV from there as a trigger, new file trigger.
Okay. Tyler, if you have a follow-up question, you can raise your hand and I'll unmute you. Else, okay. So the next question again from Matthew. Can Workato parse and determine the correct place in box to copy the file over to or from SalesForce without linking to each individual folder share URL?
What's that?
Parse and determine.
Let me see.
Yeah, it's okay.
Where is it?
So that window.
Okay. Can work out a parse and determine the correct place in box to copy the file. So you're saying, where do I put this thing, right? So, oops. So when I'm doing this, I can see this one. You can enter a custom value, the folder path. So you can construct the folder path based on information that you have.
Yeah, so I think it has follow-up information, which is if I have a client named Smith Johnny in SalesForce, a folder there, can it go to a box folder Smith Johnny?
Right. So you can you can construct the folder name here. In my screen that I'm showing, you can see my screen.
Yeah.
So you can construct it here, and then it is going to go over there. Now you're assuming that folder exists. Maybe one option is to kind of first check to see if the folder exists. If it doesn't exist, you create the folder and then you drop it there.
Okay.
Okay.
And going back to Tyler's question on the 200 row limit for processing CSV attachments. So the client has OneDrive. So the way they can do is take the attachment CSV, drop it in OneDrive.
Drop it into OneDrive and read it as CSV.
Read it as another recipe reads. Yeah. Okay.
I haven't tried with OneDrive. Dimitris, do you know? Have you played with OneDrive?
Not much really. Not much at all.
I can take a look and see. Let's. I don't know what OneDrive supports. Yep, new line in CSV, new file. Yeah, it should be okay. I have not played personally. I have not played with OneDrive, so I don't know.
Okay, so Tyler, to answer your question, create the first recipe, build the first recipe to take the attachment, drop it in a OneDrive folder, and then create a second recipe to read from the OneDrive, pick up that CSV, and then process it as a CSV. And we will share all these recipes in the product webinar, like the webinar page, where we'll post the video, the details, and the recipes that we used in the demo. So you can actually copy this recipe and reuse it for the use case that you have.
Mm-hmm. Okay, any other questions?
Any other question? I think that those were there were questions around how does on-premise work?
Okay. Let me see if I can. I think that was what I was thinking of, was on-prem and FTP. Let me see if I can search for it here.
Yeah, but while you look for it, so Scott, I think I answered your question in a private chat. But for everyone else, the support for accessing on-prem apps, it's available with our all plans other than the free and the base plan. So there's no add-on pricing that you don't have to pay anything extra. It's available, included in all plans. That's not the free plan, which is a community plan, and the base plan, which is $99 every month. And that information is available on our pricing page. So if you visit workato.com pricing, you should be able to find the details.
So this is I'm just showing an on-prem example. So you're reading a CSV from on-prem, and then it goes and looks up a bunch of stuff from lookup tables, and if it is not there, it creates it. So this is, it looks exactly like any other, like it could have been Box or Dropbox or OneDrive, whatever, it doesn't matter. So it's just looking it up from on-prem. So the only thing here is the connection. It is a on-prem connection. I cannot, because it's someone else's recipe, I cannot see it. But yeah, so you set it up as a, you have to go, it's not my account, so you have to go into your on-prem, and here you have to set it up. I don't think I have anything.
Okay, Somna, this is not a product question, but I can guarantee you're the best person to answer this. Matthew, does Workato have some type of consulting service, or someone that can create recipes for?
Yeah, we do. We do have, we do offer consulting services, but we also prefer that our partners, there are many partners over here and outside who do consulting projects. So, either if you want us to do it, we can do it, and if you're okay with working with partners, we can connect you with the partner. So each partner has a different specialty. Like, there may be someone who specializes in SalesForce, some who specialize in Intact, some who specialize in Jira, and then some who specialize in NetSuite, etc. So depending on what your requirements are, we can connect you with the right people. Or we can, if you insist, we can do it too.
Yeah, so Matthew, let's follow up and understand what you want to accomplish, and then we like whether we do it or connect with the right partners that will help you succeed. We can take that up. Scott has a question. They have a use case. Maybe you can read this. It's fairly long. So
we have a use case where we need to create a box folder for each account created in SalesForce, then create the folder for an opportunity. Can I expand this thing?
No, it's here.
Oh, okay.
I put that in the big.
Okay. So I'm going to read it. We have a use case where we need to create a box folder for each account created in SalesForce. Yes, you can do that. Then create a folder for an opportunity nested under that account. Yes. And from there, we need to pass all the files attached to the opportunity to the box folder nested under that account. Yes. When I looked at the connector, it didn't look like this is possible. If you did not know, now that so when I read it, I think it is possible. But if you can send me a recipe where you're trying to do it, we can help you out maybe later on. So yeah, we can take care of it separately. But when I read it, it should be possible. Are you having problem because it's a subfolder, or where were you having the trouble?
So I think can you how to use a nest the folder? So his follow-up question is, can you show how to nest the folder?
Where is it? Let me just open up something. My system is not okay. I'll just go back to recipes and it's a box, right? Create folder, and you give a folder name, whatever, and you choose the parent folder. So here again, you can choose folder ID. So let's say that you did a search before this point, right? So I can do a search of the parent folder. and I can give the folder, and I can give the name.
And you probably want to do an exact match.
Exact match, yeah. So, and then I just, I'll use that from this one. I'll use that as the parent folder. So that's how you'll do the subfolder, create the subfolder, and then you can move the file into that folder.
Hey Scott, does that answer your question? You're unmuted. If you have a quick follow-up, we can take that.
Yep, that's exactly what I needed. So I'd probably want to, sorry for the background noise, I would probably store the folder ID in SalesForce on the account for the account folder, and then use that.
Then you don't have to do a search.
Yep, okay, I like it. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks. Okay, we'll just have to take the one last question from Tyler and then conclude this webinar. So it's more of a feature request. So Dimitris, this probably goes to you. So the first request is to enhance the capability of processing more than 300 rows. And the second one is, would it be possible to add another utility that handles splitting a large CSV files into multiple smaller ones? Then it enables processing those CSVs sequentially.
Mm-hmm. No, that's what I'm doing in this recipe here. What I had before. Yeah, it's a giant utility. Let me show you. What was it? I think see this one. This is basically splitting a large file into multiple small files. So I used a batch size. In this case, I used a batch size of 10. So you see that there are 25 jobs which showed up because the file is 25. I think it's more than 2,500 rows. So or 250 rows. I think 250 rows. And so I used a batch size of 10, and then I'm doing a compose and upload file. So these 3 lines will create, 25 files. And if it was let's say 1,000, and I wanted to put 200, then it'll create 5 files of 200 each. So you can use this recipe as a sample.
Yeah, I think what he's looking for that it uses the Workato cloud like we do it in the recipe itself, rather than
so
using
instead of creating
storage.
It. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a
Okay.
So it's like some kind of a temporary splitter. But what
I'm trying to think of a formula trick for that, or maybe one. I can't think of one off the top of my head. If not, it would have to be probably another action in the utilities, right? Let me get back to you on this offline. I need to play with the formula and see if it's doable there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thanks, Tyler. Thanks for that question. And this will be the last one from Scott, different Scott. So Scott is using a cloud printer to push documents to Google Drive.
Mm-hmm.
And he has set up a recipe to save that file into OneDrive as well.
Mm-hmm.
So is there a way to delete files from Google Drive?
I don't know. Let me see. Some of them do, some of them don't. Oh, this is the trigger. Okay. Oh. Don't use my mouse. Google Drive. Download, create, search. There is no delete. So yeah, if you wanted to delete that, we can add that if it's a. So if you have a request like that, for all enhancement requests, go to our forums and post it there, and ask all your friends to upvote it. If you have if you have many people who want that same feature, we can prioritize it.
Folks, just before we conclude, we'll appreciate your feedback on how to make these sessions more useful and productive for your time. So please take a moment to respond to the poll that shows up. And any other feedback, you can always reach out to us over email or contact us, customer success team. But based on the feedback, it helps us refine the content of these webinars and focus on things that are most important for you. While the voting is on, we can just go over what's in there, just repeat what's in the next sessions, and then if you click on it, the product hour page, it has more details on what we're going to cover in the advanced trigger and data transformations.
Where is that?
So just scroll up, scroll up, and then just go to product hour. And so these are the next two sessions that we're going to cover, like the advanced trigger processing.
Yeah, and if there are other topics that are of interest, just let us know.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for your time and great questions in today's webinar. Some we could answer, some will follow up, and maybe later today or early tomorrow, you should find the videos on the product hour page as well. So please look at the one that you attended. If you missed any webinars in the past, you can access those videos as well. And any suggestions or topics for our subsequent webinars that will be helpful for you, just reach out to us and we'll try to prioritize that in the upcoming ones. Thank you again and have a wonderful weekend ahead.
And we'll send out all those links to the recipes.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.